So let's talk about other sectors of the economy, which of course also are affected by inflation rates, and talking about macroeconomic variables generally. We're talking about real estate development in Nigeria. And very recently, the federal government announced that it had scrapped the 10% equity contribution and housing mortgage below 5 million naira, all in a bid to encourage more Nigerians to enter the mortgage space, take a mortgage and try to make your dreams of owning a home a reality. But then the challenges of actually achieving this is what makes it's not a new issue. It's an issue that has been debated and talked about for a very long time. But what creative ways can be looked at to make sure that owning a home for a regular average Nigerian is very possible? We're hoping to get answers to some of these questions from Samuel Ukpong, who is an estate developer and the chief executive officer of 1004 Estates. Good morning to you, sir. I hope I got your name right, Samuel Ukpong.
Good morning.
It's great to have you join me on the program. Let's talk a little bit about the issues. As I mentioned already, there's nothing really new about it. But where are we at the moment?
I think significantly, the statistics show that we have about 17 million housing units deficit. That's a lot. Even if we developed 1 million units a year, it would take us 17 years to actually meet that demand. The most interesting fact is that we have a very young population. Most of our population is between the ages of 18 to about 35 years. So that's about 70 to 100 million people who need to be provided for. So the key thing we have to do now is to determine what kind of country and future do we want to create. Do we have people who will actually have housing as a right? And if it's going to be a right, then certain new things have to be done. It's the same old chicken and the egg story. Which comes first? What we have to do at this point in time is to create what I call a Q culture. Q culture is a function of the Q theory. If you leave school at the age of 21, averagely you'll be renting till about you're 30 or in some instances 40 years old. So there's a 20-year spread where people can actually make contributions into a housing fund. The government is now trying to bring out long tenured notes in the savings bond and some of their treasury bills. The returns are quite good. But we have to make a dedicated effort. Create a federal housing bond. The yield will be low, but also the amount of which you borrow will also be low. The National Housing Fund, which you have at the moment, which says for 5 million, you don't need to make a deposit, is a very good advance.
But how many people can actually take advantage of that?
Well, the National Housing Fund presently that was existing before, people make contributions into it. But because there was no traction, nobody could see a house being built or keys being handed over, people had to eventually ask for refunds of that money. So we need to free the Federal Mortgage Bank and other institutions from actual disbursement of loans. In essence, their job is to do refinance. We have a mortgage refinance corporation now, and we have the Federal Mortgage Bank. We need to create a system whereby there's nothing called raw land being sold anymore. All land has to come with infrastructure. I know for some people feel I need a plot of land. I don't need infrastructure. I don't need electricity. I don't need water. But at the end of the day, when the places are developed, all you're creating is another, totally mismatched housing.
But then you see the challenges getting access to that particular fund in the first place. And we talked about the National Housing Fund. It was a contributory scheme.
Yes.
So if the National Housing Fund has not quite adequately catered to that dream of owning a home at a certain stage of your life, is it time for a revamping, a scrapping maybe, and maybe actually talking about a housing bond and not a housing fund?
Yes, we're talking about a housing bond, like I said, because you need to create value down the chain. When you create housing for people, you're going to find out that the corruption index is going to drop. Most people are tempted towards corruption because they want to have a roof over their head. That's a legitimate desire. The issue is how do you create that for a large amount of people? We can simply do what we have done in the pension space, whereby we have created a pension commission, we created PFAs, we have created pension administrators and pension companies, which means your deductions actually get into a private sector driven environment. In that instance, you will find that if people are making contributions between the age of like 21 years old to about 30, 40 years old, even if it's 1,000 naira a month, that can become a coagulation of funds. Also, your pension funds, which you are also contributing from the time that you start employment to when you leave, is 30-year money, really. You're going to be employed till about the age of 60. You need to have access to your pension money because it's your money. and it's supposed to be given to you at the end of your working career. But we have to create a mechanism whereby you can actually access your mortgage money, you access your pension fund in order to back up your demand for a mortgage.
Yeah, because you see, mortgages are supposed to be
they are long tenured.
Long tenured, and you can't take
20, 30
short-term funds to actually fund that, which is the reason.
That
one
is
of the
a
many
fundamental
reasons,
problem in Nigeria.
Yeah,
it's a
why
mismatch.
banks don't want to do that
It's
in the
a
first
mismatch.
place.
You can't use 90-day money to fund the 20-year transaction.
So why isn't anybody really pushing to have pension funds made available to take this opportunity, to use this opportunity for young people?
But at the moment, the pension funds are not allowed to invest in housing, which doesn't make any sense. Because right now you've got a lot of money in the pension funds. So we need to be able to make some changes. We shouldn't always try to over-label the economic concepts of the West. Like I told you, I told someone earlier on, the U.S. government has for the past 12 years kept the interest rate at 0.5%. It defies all economic theories, but it did that because the economy needed to be revived. So we need to loosen some of the pension income money, not to be given to government to spend, but to be allocated to individuals to decide how they want to use that amount of money. And it should be very structured. We also need insurance companies to come into the space. Everybody that takes a mortgage will require a life insurance policy. That is life insurance policy, like today, for maybe you're looking at 30 years, 40 years, the amount you pay every month is a token. But you can then use that life insurance cash out and policy to be able to put it down in order to raise funds. Personally, again, with your pension money, plus your savings.
Are you sure there won't be a case of those funds being misused? Because you're looking at it, somebody might just decide to become fraudulent and claim that he needs to, well, this person is dead, I need to take out the insurance policy on this person and the rest of it. So you find monies being fraudulently moved around, in some cases, none at all.
No, essentially you are still going to be able to use those monies strictly for a mortgage. In essence, there has to be a property that you want to buy, there has to be a land you want to develop, there has to be a home you want to put up. The normal requirements for a mortgage will be there. What we are saying now is that you have different avenues from which to raise financing for your mortgage, because most people don't really see a path towards a home. Most people are expecting to get a home by virtue of a windfall. And we all know that the wind doesn't fall on everybody that much. So we need to create a system and a structure that actually puts people into a queue. You know, if I leave school at the age of 21, 22, if I'm making my contributions, all things being equal, I should be at the age of 30, 31, 35, be able to own your first home. Your first home doesn't have to be a mansion. That also has to be, you have to move it from that space. Your first home may be a system-built house, which means it's a prefabricated house that gives you the comfort that you need. But as your family begins to grow, you can either expand it or you leave the house, because at this point, if you've stayed there for like 10 years, you'd have accrued value on the house. The money you used to buy it and the money you'll be exiting it from will be substantially different. You'd have gotten some capital gains.
So Mr. Upong, we're looking at a financial structure that will work.
Yes.
That's what this industry badly needs.
Yes.
So to get a financial structure that will work, we know that the National Housing Fund has not quite achieved that.
No.
We're talking about maybe a national housing bond.
But
in the very short term, as we look for, well, our Ethiopia, or Utopia as the case may be, what can be done, or what should be done? It's a matter of everybody is saying everything, but what can we put our finger now on and say we're setting an agenda for the industry and we want this to happen?
Let me tell you that if you were having this discussion in the 1870s, the problem was slavery. Africans were being shipped outside this continent to Europe and America to be slaves for no cost, for no pay. But there were people that took up that lobby and they intensified. Bishop Ajayi Crowther, William Wilberforce. Eventually, slavery was abolished. We then transited into colonialism, and it became for another 100 years. The Europeans were in charge of our economies, in charge of our political lives. Again, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Obafemi Awolowo, and our respected nationalists, they fought the British to a standstill. Today, we are independent. In the 70s, we came into the issue of actually having economic independence, because we found out that our economy was being run by foreigners. Chief Obafemi Awolowo's indigenization policies solved that problem by allowing Nigerians to actually obtain loans and to buy into the shareholding that had been released by the foreign companies. So the issue here is a mindset problem. Once we seriously believe our citizens rank among the best in the world, there's nothing that says a Nigerian citizen should not get a house. Then we can begin to bring in the political will to bring all of the levers we need to put in place. The housing funds, the housing bond, insurance, the building systems that we need to adopt to actually have better homes, and putting in infrastructure in place. And then creating an environment where people do not need to be corrupt in order to get a home.
But
your first home should be a studio apartment.
Then what do developers like you say to those of us who come and say, we have a dream of achieving a home in another 15 years, but right now I'm waiting for a windfall of 25 million or 35 million to start that dream off for me on a good note? What would developers like you be saying to people like me?
Well, the problem we've had so far is that lots of developers have come into the space and they're asking people to make deposits for a home. And then actually the payment terms on when that home will be completed and when you finish paying, sometimes it's just 1 year or 2 years. So they're expecting you to put down the first deposit, and then thereafter you have to make a miracle happen by looking for the remaining 25 million, or in this case 5 million. What we need to do is that deposit that you are able to make needs to be supported by your pension money, your insurance money, and your what could I call it, a monthly contribution. If you tell a young graduate today to contribute 1,000 naira every month, it's nothing off his back. But in 10 years, just compounding the money, that money will be worth a whole lot more with which you can engage with the system.
That is if you have a graduate who comes out immediately and gets
Yes.
a job.
Yes.
But right now we have the challenge of having graduates come out that don't get jobs very easily.
Yes.
And we have the rising case of unemployment and underemployment. So at a point, there's a likelihood of such a person defaulting.
Well, let me tell you categorically that Nigeria has underestimated and refuses to recognize the value of housing construction. In the United States, they judge their economy by the number of houses that they start and they complete and how many houses are built. For two reasons. Housing industry is an ecosystem. From the guy who makes the aluminium, to the carpenter, to the tiler, to the painter, to the guy who makes the bricks, to the guys who makes the roof, to make the ceiling. You are going to have on every house built at least between 20 and 25 artisans working. And they're all working, and then they find that after they finish that job on that house, there's no new job. They have to wait. So you have to bring in developers into the space where we can develop 20,000 houses in a year. Some state governments like Lagos State are just doing 3,000 houses in a year. That tells you the amount of giant leap we need to make. We need to change the kind of houses we build. We need to use practical systems that have been proven in other parts of the world. Singapore, other places, they've done it. And move into that space forcefully, because for one reason, we want to create a working society, a humane society, a productive society. Allows people not only to just say, don't be corrupt, but they can actually channel their energies into things that they can see programmable, that they can come into. So we need to release the housing market.
So to release the housing market, do you have a timeline that you're hoping that this can be achieved?
Well, there have been studies carried out in places like Chile, Argentina, and some parts of Africa. There's a book called The Mystery of Capital, written by Hernando de Soto. His theory basically is that most of the houses we have in Nigeria today is actually value locked down. In essence, somebody has bought the land, he has put up the building in his village or in the city, and then once he's put it up, it's just there. That's an asset lying idle. We need to create a system whereby that person can go to the bank and say, I have a house, I need money released to me so I can do a business, so I can build another house, so I can invest. So the problem now is that multiple fold. We have huge demand, which is not being met, and for those who have met that demand, they are unable to unlock further value. So the mortgage refinance company right now is trying to bring some kind of uniform titling system, whereby when you get the property, the title will be uniform. That way the transactions on mortgage can be faster and brisk. So the issue here is that it's not something that one stroke will kill. It's a concerted effort. Finance side, the insurance side, the housing construction side, and the refinance side. Because once a mortgage company gives out a loan, if he has to wait for 30 years to get that money back from you, they cannot lend to another person, which is why there's a high casualty rate in mortgage companies.
Samuel Ukpong, estate developer and CEO of 1004 Estates, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives with us on the program today.
Thank you.